Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here with an interesting short episode today with somebody who has got a hypothesis that's kind of interesting about the divisional play, particularly the adjustments made in the second half, and how that might have compromised the AFCC game planning and what happened in that championship game. Ben Mihal is here to join us. Ben, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ken.
I appreciate you coming on. So tell us at a high level kind of what the theory is.
Theory is that the Ravens were just playing really well. They made their adjustments in the second half. The first half was a little clunky, obviously. Came out with a nice, quick passing attack. They were running the ball well. And it seemed to me that they kind of really wanted to pile it on in some cases. They broke out the QB sweep, pass to Likely, something that we've seen them do a few times. And then kind of late in the game, they could be running it down pretty far into the fourth quarter, and they break out the little Stanley escort, kind of a really nice fourth and short, or just a general short yardage play that, I don't know that we needed to do on 2nd and 5. We get this great moment from Lamar running up the tunnel. It's a lot of fun. I know you were at the game, Ken. So there was some value in that, of course, but it seemed to me like those might've been some things they wanted to keep in their pocket one more week or two.
All right. So maybe we start with the Stanley play in particular. So this is, if I recall, that was on 4th and 1, right? They converted.
So we saw it the first time, 50-yard line, 4th and 1. It was the second drive in the second half. And they were showing signs of stalling out a little bit, it seemed like. The third and 2 play wasn't great. So I liked it. I mean, it was a great play at the time, and Lamar takes it a good 15 plus yards, I think, if I remember right.
That set them up and as part of the big 24-0 second half. And I guess they were up 7, I think, at the time. And so it would have been, they would have given the ball back to them.
Oh, it was a big time. Yeah, it was a big time play call for sure. And there was something where, if you watch The Wired or something else, where Harbaugh kind of said something to Stanley about making an improvisation. I was watching something else where there was some discussion that might have been called that way. Maybe it's read by Lamar. I guess we can't really know for sure either way.
Well, one of the things about that play is that Stanley had tried to, they'd run a similar play where Stanley had to make a block on the left side.
That would seem like a little off schedule, if I remember right, that first time where Lamar was hoping Stanley did something and it didn't quite happen that way, I guess.
Stanley, of course, tried to give him his hand, bring him up, and Lamar
he was lying on the ground, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I always love when you see something like that from Lamar. We don't always get those moments, so I always enjoy when we see a little fire from him like that.
That's what you get robbed of, by the way, in terms of understanding football when they pan away to Taylor Swift.
Right, exactly.
So anyway, you miss that.
You're right. I'm always for more Lamar content, and what I'll say is we were robbed of a great Wired. It seemed like he was the guy with the microphone on in the championship game.
Yeah. All right, so they came back, great second half in that game. You talked about that play. There was another?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first 4th and short, I mean, you're totally right. Super high leverage that really got things rolling. But then if you kind of follow that drive, they get the little offside at the end of the third quarter. So they're looking at a 1st and 5 coming into the fourth quarter, get a nice little 4-yard run, 2nd and 1, you're in the red zone, and they break out the sweep. And it's great. I mean, they've shown that a few times before, 2022, we saw that to Likely in the Saints game. Earlier this year, when they were really trying to, it was a Greg Olsen game. I can't remember if it was Lions or Seahawks. And kind of Olsen called it out as it was happening that the pass was off of it. So I don't know, they've shown it before. Maybe the Chiefs would have been all over that anyway, but it seemed to me like a nice high red zone look that they definitely didn't need to give there on 2nd and 1 red zone against the Texans.
Okay, so I'm looking at this at the 2nd and 1. They had Gus Edwards left end for 5 yards. Is that the play we're talking about?
We're talking about the play setting it up. You're saying?
No, I'm really looking at I'm looking for the sweep play you're describing.
Oh no, a sweep. Quarter. I mean, Lamar showing that he's going to run the sweep and then throwing it up high for Likely, and it's the there you go, up high from Likely. Yeah. Okay,
so that was early in Q4.
Right, exactly.
The second play of that quarter. Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely I'm not going to say they haven't used it at all, but it probably hasn't worked out exactly that way with a pass to the tight end, maybe in 2023.
Right. They got one to Andrews where it was like right down to I think literally the 1 yard line. It didn't punch it in, or maybe he did actually extend it.
No, that's
I remember.
Is that the play where in the Cincinnati game where Wilson tackled him at the 1?
No, I'm thinking earlier where it was Olsen calling it out as it was happening. But regardless, I mean it's a nice look. Everybody's rolling out, showing the quarterback run. Lamar puts it up high. I don't know. I feel like that's one where you could just as easily make a case for 2nd and 1, run it 3 times. You're first and goal at that point. You keep milking the clock. But to your point before, it was also only a 7-point game at that point. So the momentum of getting that nice 14-point lead sure was great as well.
Okay, so the idea is that having those 2 plays in the divisional game compromised what they could use in terms of the comeback.
I don't know if it even compromised. I think it was more, that was kind of where I was coming in with it as I rewatched the second half. Maybe it doesn't compromise. It almost was like they were looking to kind of break out all these plays that were almost looking to like run the score up a little bit more, make the box score look a little bit better. You get Lamar pass. And then my point was as well with showing the Stanley escort play yet again to cap the 3rd drive in the second half. I mean, it was, like I said, it was a beautiful moment for the home team there. But once again, they probably could have just handed it off. Hill was running it really well. Maybe they give Cook a nice little like red zone touch there at that point.
Okay. So other things they could have done, the Chiefs had to be ready for an awful lot of stuff in that AFC Championship game, I guess I would say.
Absolutely.
Stanley, it's just a small part of it, honestly, in terms of
Right.
of what's going on. But he was very effective getting out in front of plays those last 4 games of the season. Actually gives me a lot of confidence in Stanley for 24. Renewed confidence. Let's say not a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I remember things trending that way kind of down the stretch. The rotation was certainly a unique move for the Ravens to break out, but it seemed to work out well. And I think the fact that the thing for me was that I don't remember them doing the Stanley little rollout play before. You said you had remembered them at least once this year, but the fact that we saw it twice in the same game was kind of surprising to me also.
I'm trying to remember if it was the Seahawks or the Lions, but a very similar 4th and 1 play where Stanley got out in front of it and 9 or 10 yards.
Oh, he escorted the guy all the way to the sideline, didn't he? Right. Into
the trench.
Right.
The field. Yeah, so
yes. Okay. So there you go. Right. Yeah. And that was another situation where they're pulling out some of these stops where, once again, the game's decided at that point.
Probably true. I'm trying to remember exactly where they were in that game, but it was probably 14-0 or 21-0 already. Right, and they were getting more ahead. Okay. Well, then let's transport this forward to the Chiefs game and maybe talk a little bit about what they might have done differently there.
It's so hard to say. My main takeaway from watching the Texans like second half again, just for this exercise is, and I watched the whole offense, was that, they were running the ball so well. I hate to just be that guy that's talking about the running back attempts, but it was really interesting to also see again in the Texans game, Lamar running. And not only was he taking a lot of options to run, it seemed like they had designed a few. The first rushing touchdown where things were really spread out, they've got Edwards leading him down there. So I don't know, it's just so surprising that we didn't see any of that either in the Chiefs game. I know all the talk's been about the running back carries, but the thing about the Texans game was Lamar was really, really running it.
Yep. Yeah, he ran it effectively, and they ran it effectively with everybody in that game in the second half.
Hill, it was one of the better games I can remember from Hill. Also, just the way it looked. He was really looking fast and powerful in that Texans game.
Yeah. There are things to do. I'm not in any way relieving Monken of failing to establish a run game, because I think one of the things that the Ravens really needed to do in that game was to stay multiple. But if you're talking about the primary 3 villains that the Ravens faithful like to blame on this, it seems like number 1 is Harbaugh in the group, number 2 is Monken, and number 3 is Lamar. I'd have the order differently. I'd have Harbaugh at the bottom with Monken number 1 and Lamar number 2.
I would too. I kind of feel similarly. It's just the stress level was so high. It just felt like, the score was tight, and it just felt like we were trying to, there's no 14-point play, obviously, but it seemed like that we got the little mic'd up moment where Lamar's saying, it was tied up if the strip sack didn't happen. And I wonder if that was the best way for him to be viewing it. He wanted so badly to just tie it up and have this big defeat of Mahomes, of course.
Right. Well, he definitely held that ball too long on the strip sack in terms of what he did. But it's just part of how the other team adjusts to you, forces you to readjust. And the Ravens obviously were a little bit slower to readjust, but part of the reason I'm upset, but not as upset as other people are about only there being 6 carries from the running backs in this game, was that if the Chiefs are going to be run blitzing all the time, and blitzes effectively are all run blitzes.
Absolutely.
You have to find a way to beat that with quick passes.
Yep.
And those quick passes can be deep, by the way, because it only takes about 2.1 seconds to get out a pass that can be caught 40 yards downfield. That's the old Walsh timing of the play.
Right.
And it includes
the Dolphins offense this year. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it certainly could be something that they do that way. But, I think part of the issue was Spagnuolo found something that they were effective doing, and they really failed to find the counter for that. And as many times as they continued to fail to find what would really work against that, Lamar tried to take the game more and more into his own hands.
Just hitting back there. Absolutely. Yeah. Look, just right. That was the other thing with the Texans game, was the quick passing attack was really, they really figured it out. I mean, I think of a few games where we would see Lamar. I almost think of the comparison I initially made was the Monday night game comeback against the Colts, where we saw them in the second half just going crazy with the short passing game. You almost never see Lamar just throwing like 20, passes or whatever it was under 5-10 yards. And it seemed like that would have been there for them in the Chiefs game as well. Right. It's an excellent point, Ken.
Yeah. As that you're talking about the Colts game in 21 when they had the great comeback, won in overtime. Yeah. That game, their last 4 drives of the game, I think it was their last 4 drives, it might even be longer than that, but it was at least their last 4 drives where they scored each one. They did not reach third down on any of those drives.
Right, exactly. I mean, the aggressiveness to truly say we're being pass first in the situation, with the tempo also. And I mean, of course, we don't often see that kind of up tempo look from the Ravens either. Sustained up tempo, I guess, if you would.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing about coming back, to the Chiefs game and talking about some of these specialty 4th and short plays is we never even found ourselves in that situation that much. So maybe they wouldn't have broken out the little Stanley play or whatever it was. We saw them with the one QB keeper in the first quarter there.
Right. They are a team where you get behind the sticks and you're in a lot of trouble because the strength of the team is at corner. They're very willing to pass and let their sticky corners, play you tight and see if they can win. And they were effective doing it. And obviously Lamar, all quarterbacks have trouble with that sort of pressure. Some are able to read hot and go very quickly, but Chiefs are a team that is they're literally their best strength on defense, other than Chris Jones, is their 3 starting cornerbacks who are just all outstanding. So they really put the Ravens in a bad position.
They sure did. Yeah.
All right. Other things about this game that disappointed you about the AFC game in terms of what they could have done differently?
No, I mean, the other disappointing thing was just the fact that when you watch it again, that you see just that despite all of our talk about a bad game plan and all of that, it really comes down to 1 or 2 plays. And, you hate to think of being a fan and reliving that, but you really hate to think of the player having to relive some of those tough moments, thinking about, some tough fourth quarter decisions from Lamar there. And of course, the fumble at the goal line.
You had some notes and some that you sent me, and one of them was, why not show a Duvernay sweep or something else different against the Chiefs? And this is something that I kind of...
Or even the week before, right? Like, why not put that on tape against the Texans? That's kind of where I was going also. Why not in one of those late game, you're running it, over and over again. Why not break out a little sweep action or something like that?
And they had Hill, they had 4 speed guys on this team entering camp. They had Hill, they had Keaton Mitchell, and they got about as much as they could out of those 2 guys as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Flowers, they used too much on gadget plays, and they needed his speed more down the field. But the one guy who's underutilized this year is Duvernay. And they could have gotten him in for more gadgetry as the season rolled on. Still, after he came back from the injury, looked pretty good returning the football.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I was thinking going back to that 21 season again, or maybe I guess it was actually the 20 season. We saw a lot of that jet action with Dobbins, kind of in a two-back look where we saw Dobbins on a sweep a lot. And I always thought that they would maybe give us some of Keaton Mitchell in that role. But of course, Duvernay just fine. We saw Bateman get one of those sweeps one time this year. So, I mean, they've mixed it up a little bit, but it didn't seem like we saw a lot of that, them actually giving the ball on the jet late in the season.
Yeah, they definitely did not do too much of that. Mitchell became a tremendous weapon, and this is really give us an idea of just how much we missed Mitchell for the game against the Chiefs. He was a tremendous weapon in the draw. I mean, Hill was at times too, but just getting him the ball and allowing those pass rushers to rush themselves out of position. And in that Chiefs game, I thought one of the things that was an opportunity was the Chiefs got past the pocket a fair amount in this game. So they had their guys rushing south of the pocket, blocked 12-6, as I call it, which opens up lanes to run, but they couldn't really take advantage of it. And Lamar didn't take advantage of it, and they couldn't also do it with the draw as well, which is one great way to do it. Some of Keaton Mitchell's big plays early in the year against the Lions and against other Seahawks were on just such plays.
It's a great point. I mean, his running style is so unique out of that kind of look. I remember noticing that just if you just watch the highlights again. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the timetable we can look at for him will look like, but I'm still excited that he was such a great find, and hopefully we'll see some big things from him still in the next few years. Yeah,
I hope all of the second season is not wasted, but I am immediately concerned that that's the case, and that he'll ramp up to be something like a shadow of himself by the end of the second year, and then hopefully by the third year he's okay again. It reminds me a lot of the Webb injury in terms of its seriousness to a young player. Getting hurt like this is just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I think the Ravens are always going to take this cautious approach now after what's happened the last few years, especially the direct comparison to Dobbins, of course. But I mean, I kind of think of the Breece Hall and the Jets situation. He looked pretty good this year coming off of a pretty similar injury. I think the timing was a little earlier in the year than the Keaton Mitchell injury, but I think it just depends on the athlete and the injury sometimes. I mean, I'm certainly not a doctor, but right. I have my fingers crossed for Keaton Mitchell. That's for sure.
Do you happen to know when Breece Hall was injured? I'm going to just see if I can look at it and see.
I'm thinking it's week 5 or 6, pretty early in the season, if I remember right. Relatively early, at least. And Mitchell was relatively late, I guess, if you will.
And he played the whole season for the Jets this year and looked good. But I'm going to look.
He was looking good week 1 this year. Yeah, I mean, just from like a fantasy perspective, I remember a lot of conversation about that. And yeah, he kind of started fast and he played well the whole year.
Okay, so week 7 for Hall last year. Go. Yeah. And so if it was what, week 15 or something for Mitchell?
Yeah,
even later.
15 if I'm remembering right.
So
that's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're probably looking at the middle of the year before he's back. If at a worst case, probably because Hall had to probably be ready in the preseason at some point if he's out there playing week 1 with a fairly full workload. All right.
Seems like the Ravens have shown us the way that they want to like ramp these guys up and get the full week or 2 of practice in, whatever it might be. So I'm sure it'll be a while, like you said, before we see him next year.
One other thing I want to talk about while you're here is whether or not you're buying into any of the notion that getting a particular player like Henry or like some other running back is going to completely change the situation for a game like this.
Oh, for a game like this. I mean, I've seen it both ways, right? I mean, the argument there's certainly an argument that what if they only gave Henry 6 carries, or how Dobbins felt about his workload in previous playoff games. So yeah, I mean, I think it's if there's more like money kind of at stake on the running back or something like that, or a bigger name, maybe there would have been some of that. That's a really good point. I didn't think of it like that. I'm not a believer that that's really the driving factor here. And I think basically what happened in the run and pass situations is that, first of all, a lot of their run plays were actually RPOs. Yep. So they did many more of those this year. So they go to the mesh point and then they come out and throw. And that's an option play. I mean, Lamar has to decide on the fly whether he's going to throw the ball or not. The other thing that they have is, times where they'll call 2 plays in the huddle and it's a check with me kind of play at the line of scrimmage, or it's a check play at the line of scrimmage. And Lamar could look at the defense, see the blitzes coming,
go to the pass, and because you're going to have less success with the run. You want to get the ball over the defense to the degree you can, or go to some play that'd be effective. And whatever he had as his other play, just what he wasn't able to hit or wasn't particularly effective. And I don't think personnel changes per se were going to fix this. It had to be like, what are the option between plays? There's some of that. Maybe if you have RPOs you're relying on, which take a while to develop, that you probably needed a faster way to get your play taken care of. And they did that against the Texans. So they certainly knew how to create a fast-paced offense. The question just was, could they do it against the Texans? Absolutely terrible secondary. Even Darryl Stingley had not a great year in terms of yards per target versus the Chiefs' outstanding secondary and all they bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, and you could totally see why Lamar might want to go out of some of those plays. I mean, there were a few 1st and 10s where they ran it. I'm thinking of Tranquil absolutely stuffing one, and Reed came in and kind of blew one up, both in the first half, if I remember right, in the Chiefs game. And I understand why they wanted to get away from it. They felt like they were losing the 2 possessions coming in, the Chiefs getting the ball in the second half. But the defense did what they needed to do. And if a more patient approach probably would have been the way to go ultimately.
All right. Well, appreciate having you on, Ben. This is a great topic, worth discussing. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Thanks so much, Ken. Yeah, not talking a ton of football, but you'll find me chipping in here and there at Classic Mihal on Twitter. And thanks so much for letting me do this with you, Ken. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Love to have you back, Ben. And by the way, if you want to be one of the people who does a individual Raven from the past that was your favorite, I'll be looking forward to your selection. We've got a bunch now in, some really weird ones. We have somebody who wants to do Laquan Williams already, and we have about 4 people who want to do Jarrett Johnson. So he's already taken. But otherwise,
what about Torrey Smith?
Torrey Smith is a fairly high.
That's too high profile,
but I don't have a problem with that. We have somebody who wanted Derek Mason already. We had somebody who wanted Dallas Thomas. Those are certainly great things. So I'm marking you down here.
I love it.
All right. Outstanding. Other folks out there, you know what the series is. Just hit me up. DM's are always open on Twitter. I'll look for your. So if you want to get your player in, just send it to me by DM and say, hey, Ken, I'd like to do, Chad Williams or Ralph Staten or somebody else. High priority and high value is given to any Ravens prior to 2000. Okay. So I'd really like to hear from you if you want to do a player before 2000. But otherwise, I'm always interested. I always have Larry Webster is another player who's already taken. So it's a kind of an interesting. He did actually play for the Ravens before 2000. So that's a good one. But Ben, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks again, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.